Oh, very appropriate, Steven.
Yes, that's the way you start a podcast.
I'm worried about being super professional, and Steven just blows that door away.
I mean, it's our podcast. I mean, I don't play by the rules, just kind of like the guy we're going to talk about today.
I do have to remember that it is our podcast, so I guess people can choose whether they want to listen or not based on our professionalism or lack thereof.
Yeah, I mean, I pay for it, so...
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that is very true. It's Steven's brain engine child.
Yeah, I'm the financer, I'm the producer.
He's the executive producer
and
producer.
But, it's there's no rules for me. I don't give a shit.
That's the one thing with podcasting is you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, within reason.
Within reason.
I don't want to offend people as much as,
commit crimes on here.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to murder this person while it's doing this podcast right now.
Yeah, you can't see it. You can only hear it. So is it real? Is it not real?
Yeah, you never know. You never really know.
Orson Welles' broadcast of War of the Worlds where people thought the world was ending.
Yeah.
People didn't know any better. But... transitioning from that, let's go into something that we talked before. We got an intro.
Do we know who? Do they know who we are? The first time listeners?
I hope so.
Because I know this episode's going to be popular because we're talking about one of the most popular directors out there. But if you have not come across this podcast before, this is the Cinema Discovery Project.
It is the Cinema Discovery.
I know
Project.
Everybody probably talks about us, but
we are all over the water.
We're pretty popular. We're like the Ebert and Robert of the podcast world. I'm Stephen Billings, and with me, as always, is the Andrew Cabral, only Andrew Cabral. The Andrew Cabral.
Well, there's so many of us around that. Yeah. I guess I'm just one of many, but it is me. I'm here. It's like that part in the opening of Austin Powers' Spy Who Shagged Me. That's you over there.
Oh yeah, it's you.
But now we can transition to something we talked about last time, which is Criterion Spy Number 1000. We were waiting and waiting for it to drop last episode, which was 2 weeks ago, and then they waited until past Comic-Con to do that. Yeah,
they waited that week. We had to go through another week since that last episode dropped. We had to wait a whole other week till we finally got the news this past week, which is when this will come out, about a week after we found out the news.
Pretty much. So it has happened most recently, and what many people guessed, what many people assumed, it is a Godzilla box set of movies. Yes. Blu-ray box set.
The Showa era.
It's the Showa era, which I believe is like every Godzilla produced by Toho.
Yeah.
From 1954, the original, I think all the way to 1975, 76.
Something
around
like that,
there. Yeah. So it is basically 20 years or more worth of Godzilla movies.
I think it's 15 films.
It is 15 films.
Yeah.
And they're all the Japanese era. Well, I mean, they're all the Japanese productions. Like we said last time, there's only been 3 American Godzilla movies. So all the rest have been Japanese. And it's going to be a massive set. 15 movies.
Maybe not as big. Not as big as the Bergman set.
No, the Bergman set was gigantic.
It was twice that size.
It really was, and twice the price, I think. Yeah. But the artwork for it is up online. It's going to be really colorful, really vibrant, really interesting looking, reminding me a lot of the Zatoichi set in terms of just the overall colors, the way they're really popped, but obviously much bigger. It looks like to be the same design as the Bergman set, which is, that kind of gigantic, oversized book-type packaging, really thick cardboard box set. But it looks like it's coming out in October, so it's very, very soon.
It's right there, right before the sale.
Before the sale, which leads to the question for those of you who collect out there: are you going to wait for the sale to get it at 50% off?
Oh yeah.
Or are you gonna bite the bullet and buy it when it's more expensive? And have you already pre-ordered it? Because I think it's already up for pre-order on Amazon.
But it's like more than the price on Criterion.
Yeah, it's like $200 and something dollars.
It's like $225 on Amazon when it's only $179 on Criterion.com.
That's kind of crazy. That looks like Amazon's selling it for like the official like regular price. The manufacturer's price, or something like that. Whatever those MSRP and all those those anagram things that I
I
can't
think it'll
quite
change
figure
the
out.
closer we get to the time.
Oh, it always does.
Yeah,
It always does.
but last time I bought the Bergman set on Amazon, and I got it, and I got it right away. So that is probably what I want to do, but I that price has got to come down first.
What's crazy is I bought it during the sale because Amazon just price matched it at 50% off, and I'm pretty sure it was selling out quick. That Bergman set sold out very quick in store and on BarnesandNoble.com.
I expect this to happen too. Yeah. I expect
this is
going
to sell out fast.
Yeah.
Although there is some pushback against the set because these Godzilla films are, they are monster movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. This isn't high art Italian cinema, French cinema, American cinema, whatever. So, I guess there's pushback against it. Those people who had problems with some other releases in the Criterion Collection, like The Princess Bride, and stuff like that, where they're kind of like gatekeepers, oh, this movie's not worthy of being in the collection, and all those types of people. And I'm like, man, I mean, it's not the first time Criterion has gone this route when it comes to their films. I mean, Armageddon's in the collection, The Rock is in the collection,
sure, yeah,
The Blob is in the collection.
But people forget that the Criterion Collection is not just about, gatekeeping only for films that are considered masterpieces.
Right. That's not their message.
It's about, collecting movies that had an impact. Whether they're good, bad movies have impacts too.
Oh yeah.
But it's not just about whether the movie's a 10-star movie. It's about,
if you look at
that Godzilla movies were, pioneers in special effects.
Not only that, they're probably the Godzilla character in general is probably the most well-known kaiju of all time.
Yeah,
I mean, he is the king of the monsters for a reason. He's recognizable whether you've seen the movies or not. People just know Godzilla, and I think that's culturally important. And Criterion does have a mission statement, I guess, where it's basically to put out movies that are culturally important, that are movies that are maybe unseen movies or movies that are cult movies, things like that. The definition of what they put out has been all over the place.
Yeah.
They've put out the highest art in Bergman, like we were just talking about, and also put out Michael Bay. I mean, there's a range there of which they can work in, and I can't wait for this set because I'm a big Godzilla fan. I really like the monster movies of that era, and you kind of have to, when you watch those movies, you got to put them in context of when they came out. You got to put them in context of what were the budgets like at that time? What was technology like at that time? It's nothing it is today.
And Toho is a very important
Japanese,
studio.
Important Japanese production studio that made a lot of Japanese films.
Yeah,
not just the Godzilla films. And it's a really important culture, and I think it's a portal into the kaiju films of that time because there were so many of them.
It's important to Japanese culture too.
As well, yeah. I mean, and Godzilla's a gateway into all of the other monsters, I think. Yeah. I mean, maybe not King Kong. King Kong is kind of his equal in terms of recognizability. But things like Mothra and Rodan and Ghidorah and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the thing about the Godzilla movies are, and some of them are more, I guess you could say, relevant at this than others, but the movies are allegories for nuclear war, and they have a message. It's not like they're just they're not Sharknado, where they're just stupid monster movies for the sake of seeing them fight. There is a little bit of a message there.
Some of them are cheesy and dumb.
Sure, but typically it's got
Son of Godzilla.
Some
really
of it's got
cheesy and dumb.
Typically though, there's a reason for it. It might be cheesy, but the reason for the new monster or something has something to do with some kind of thing behind it, some kind of message. So I just feel bad for you because you've been buying them up on Blu-ray. And
luckily for me, I started doing it and this is gonna be just to look at just collecting in general. I went to get. Because I want to get all the ones from Kraken released, and Kraken released Sony Pictures released some other ones. But what happened is recently the Kraken releasing Blu-rays started going out of print. They started going from $10 on Amazon to being out of stock.
Now we know why.
We can only get it from third place. So people who were selling a $10 Blu-ray from a month ago is now $50, $60, $70 on eBay. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why did this happen all of a sudden? And they announced the set, and of course, those movies are in the set.
Yeah.
Things like Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Godzilla vs. The Smog Monster, or Ibera Horror of the Deep.
I can't wait to do I can't wait to do a binge on all these movies. I'm gonna binge these
What's
movies.
crazy? There's a continuity. It's a loose continuity, but it's there between these movies because I've been watching them in order. I love watching franchises in order from like beginning moving forward. Sometimes there's no continuity at all.
Like
Sometimes
the X-Men franchise.
X-Men, I mean, their timelines are all like ridiculous. The one of the worst ones is Highlander because it makes no goddamn sense. Once you get past the first movie, things just go crazy. But I mean, like you see, like there's a somewhat of a continuity. Like these monsters show up and then they show up again, and then and sometimes they partner with Godzilla to fight another one, or sometimes they fight Godzilla. It's a whole big thing where you see kind of this tapestry of monsters. But man, I'm glad that those ones that I missed out on are in this set. So now I don't have to pay $50 for a $10 Blu-ray.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean, on eBay or something like that. Granted, I like that it's just the Showa era, and it's just like it's that complete first era.
Yeah.
We're gonna do probably a whole episode on Godzilla, but there's like there's different eras. There's Showa, Heisei, and then there's a third one, which is like kind of the modern stuff. Yeah. And of course, there's the American stuff, but I like having like all of those in one box set, like a complete block of a franchise in one set, and that's kind of cool just for collector's sake. But yeah, I can't wait. So I guess we can move on to our main topic.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, so with the coinciding the release of his newest film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, please excuse me because I'm going to say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I'm probably going to say Once Upon a Time in America a few times, Once Upon a Time in the West.
In Mexico.
Once Upon a Time in Mexico. There's been a lot of those titles with, that sound the same.
I think because Tarantino's such a film fan.
Yeah, he did.
He wanted one of his films to be a Once Upon a Time movie.
Oh yeah, he did.
He was like, God, really, so many good movies with Once Upon a Time in the title. I want to have one.
It plays into the movie very well, especially looking at it as a whole. But we'll get to that in the end. But coinciding with the release of his new film, we wanted to take an overall general look at Quentin Tarantino, his filmography, his influences, or things that have influenced him, because he has been one of probably the most talked about filmmakers of our time pretty much since he got on the scene. Just doing research, I was telling Steven, there's just so many things written about him. There are so many interviews, so many talks, so many think pieces written, so many articles about him over his entire career that it's overwhelming just to get into all of that
stuff. He's
a
filmmaker that very much likes to be in the spotlight.
I don't know if what's crazy, he likes to be in it, and people just devour his films.
Oh yeah.
Like just Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the fervor and the talk about it is unlike the talk and fervor around most films. And his films aren't exactly mainstream. These aren't franchise movies. These aren't big tentpole.
They're not
intellectual properties.
They're not mainstream, but I think a lot of it has to do with him as a personality. Is part of he has made his own brand. Tarantino is a brand.
It's his name. His name. Yeah. There are few directors today working whose names are so significant that you can recognize them just by their last name. Yeah, you don't even need to know their first name.
I would say the only other ones that really stand out to me are probably Spielberg, still Scorsese, still. I would even say J.J. Abrams has gotten to a point where he's kind of like you hear J.J. Abrams, you know who he is.
Yeah, but it's more like his first and last name go together. Like J.J. Abrams, because it's just J.J.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And then of course Christopher Nolan.
Nolan's a big one. Scorsese, like you said. There aren't many directors that can just sell their movies based off their names.
Nolan just made a World War II movie, and it made like $600 million.
Yeah, I know. It's really fascinating. It's kind of interesting how we always talk about, do stars still sell movies? Which stars sell movies nowadays? Or is it about the recognition of the property more so than the people who are in it? Or is it a combination of both? Is it the filmmaker? I mean, there's just so many different marketing tactics.
It just really depends. I mean, I mean, obviously guys like Tarantino and Nolan are proven that it doesn't have to be IP that can make you a lot of money.
No.
You know, you just need to be, you know, studios need to take more chances, I think.
Right.
But
and
you know,
what is interesting is when it comes to Tarantino, his films, you know, the opposite of Nolan, these aren't gigantic, big action movie
Not really,
production things. No, these movies are smaller. I want to say that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood may be one of his more expensive movies because it was a period piece.
it's I looked at the budget. It's 90 million.
That's not
And which I think Django is his most expensive
That
movie. I
makes
think
sense.
Django was like a little over $100 million. So.
But even then, in comparison to some other things, that's not a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's still like a mid-budget movie. You know, it's considered nowadays a
yeah,
90
I would
million's
say.
a mid-budget. You know, so because most movies now, most of these big movies are $200 million movies.
Yeah, so so in just saying all of that, we're probably just going to go over general stuff that probably things most of you Tarantino fans already know.
and
if you don't know it,
yeah.
I guess this is a nice refresher.
Yeah,
refresher
we'll do a little
informative.
overview, and at the very end of our kind of overview, we're gonna do like we'll give our first impressions without spoilers. For Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then I think do you want to go into some spoiler territory?
I mean, depending on time, I guess.
Because it's kind of tough to talk about certain things without.
Well, to
giving
be
you-
honest, I mean, there's things in there that people shouldn't be spoiled about if you understand Tarantino, if you understand. There's not really a lot to spoil in the movie, but we'll get to that. But before we go on that.
We'll see where we're at, and we'll see if
Yeah.
you want to go into spoilers.
Yeah, so we'll start off with a little biographical backstory about Quentin Tarantino. Not enough to write a whole biography on him, but he was born in Knoxville, Tennessee on March 27th, 1963. For some reason, I
He's a
thought he was
Pisces.
older.
He's a Pisces like me.
Oh, I didn't know you knew astrological signs. But so he was born there. His father was an actor and producer, and early on in his life, they moved to California, and then I think his parents split up when he was very, very young in the mid 1960s. So they moved back to the South. I can't remember if it was back to Knoxville, or if it was to someplace else. But he's actually named after. This is kind of appropriate. He's named after Quint Asper, who is a character played by Burt Reynolds in
yeah.
Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
And that's kind of very interesting considering he'd be a super duper, movie TV
Oh
fanatic.
yeah,
man.
and
you know what I mean?
That's part of why I think he wanted him in. He wanted him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood originally.
He did.
and
He unfortunately passed away.
Yeah.
Before they could shoot his scenes, and he was, because his parents divorced and he moved back to Knoxville, like I was saying, in 1966, and then they moved back to Los Angeles, I believe, later on, and his mother ended up getting remarried to a musician, I believe, and that is kind of where, in his adolescence is where he kind of found movies and kind of found the theaters. He actually wrote his first screenplay at 14 years old, which is really, really interesting. The movie was called Captain Peach Fuzz.
Yeah. Yes.
And the Anchovy Bandit, which was the Anchovy Bandit I think was a take on Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
It was a take on that Hal Needham's film from '77. But when he was very, very young, he saw films that he probably shouldn't have seen because he was super young. I guess his mother was very open-minded when it came to what he could consume as a child, because he saw movies like Carnal Knowledge and Deliverance, and these movies came out in 71, 72. So
Burt Reynolds again.
He was like 10 years old. You know
Burt
what I
Reynolds
mean?
again, huh?
Yeah, Burt Reynolds again, and which is really, really interesting how that connection is. But like I said, he wrote his first screenplay at 14. I mean, at 15, he actually dropped out of high school. What is really important to know is that Quentin Tarantino didn't go to film school.
Yeah.
He's one of several well-known...
There's a lot of guys from that time that didn't go to school. Yeah.
And I mean, there's so much to say about it, but basically back then you had to go to film school. It's not like today where you don't really have to go to film school to learn how to make movies, but back then that's kind of the only place where you could get any, like, quote unquote formal, technical knowledge about
Yeah,
how
that
to make
that and
movies.
access to cameras and
Not well, yeah, well, access to cameras, access to equipment. To learn general structures of things. Like how to set up, how to technically shoot a movie. Scene setups and
yeah,
all this kind of technical stuff. Back then, you needed to do it because you also needed it to get into the business.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Because that's where the recruiting ground was for production companies in Hollywood and places like that. Is they would the young students coming up would be the next generation of filmmakers, screenwriters, editors, production people,
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. It's not like today where there's so many more avenues of education that you can pursue when it comes to learning about how to make movies. You know what I mean? Neither Steven and I went to film school, yet we watch and talk about movies as people who make them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we have the verbiage, we have the education. We have the education to be able to do that. Stuff we just learned on ourselves by just doing what essentially Tarantino did. Watch movies.
Yeah.
That's basically what I know. Paul Thomas Anderson was the same way. He initially went to film school, didn't like it, dropped out, and just said, I just went and watched movies. That's how I learned how to make movies.
Yeah.
And Tarantino was the same way. So at around 15 years old, he became an usher at a porn theater called the Pussycat Theater. Interesting how you get this kind of tapestry and combination of certain things where like he's watching these adult oriented films when he's really young. He's working at an adult theater when he's also in his teenage years as well. And then of course he did what many people do in the 1980s is he worked at a video store. And he just like consumed so many movies and he would talk about movies. He just was a sponge for movie knowledge. And if you've ever seen a interview with Quentin Tarantino, this guy knows movies like crazy. He is like a super cinephile sponge of knowledge. He and Martin Scorsese are these types of people where they just have these catalogs in their brains about movies, and they bring up stuff that you've never heard of before. B-movies from the 1970s or 1980s that were just drive-in movies that you've never seen.
Well, it's because he had access to things that most people didn't. Back then people couldn't just, not everything was easily accessible. I mean, it was, But
what is interesting though is that he grew up during the age of growing accessibility to movies. He grew up during the VHS age, VHS, Betamax. Like I said, he worked at a video store. I find it very interesting that the people of his generation who grew up the same time frame as him, born in maybe the 60s or 70s and grew up in the 70s and 80s, were part of the VHS era. That's where they learned about movies, where they watched movies, because movies became more accessible. And we're kind of like the generation after that, where movies have been even more accessible to us, and now, movies are like you can access a movie instantly, like at any point, any time. If you have an internet connection, you can get almost any movie you want, whether you want to pay or not want to pay, whether it's streaming or not streaming. We can get any movie at any time. But though back then, that kind of stuff was starting to come around. But I also wanted to mention that he's kind of a cinema purist from a certain perspective, where he loves celluloid, 35 millimeter prints, 16 millimeter prints, 8 millimeter prints, and onward, where he probably has a gigantic collection of movies on film that he uses and collects.
He owns
screens.
He owns a movie theater in L.A.
The New Beverly.
Yeah.
The New Beverly, which I think he bought around 2010, and it's supposed to exclusively run film prints of movies.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was if it initially had both and then he got rid of the digital projectors, or if it still does both. I don't really know too much about it. But all I know is that it screens old movies like all the time. That's its thing. It's a repertory theater. That there's a lot of theaters like that, but most of them I think now are digital versus actual like 35 millimeter canister prints of movies. A lot of them I assume are also from his own personal collection.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think Martin Scorsese, I think, is the same way. He's got film prints and all that kind of stuff. Because typically back then, like we've said, even though VHS had come around, before that, you could only really get them through film prints. That was pretty much about it. So he's got all of that wealth and all of that knowledge, and he kind of takes all of that stuff, all of that cinematic history he's got in his head, and he puts it directly into his movies. And watching his movies are a good kind of gateway into a lot of things from cinema's past. That's how I kind of got into all of the things that we've talked about many times on here. Film noir, Japanese, samurai film, Italian films, horror films, all this kind of stuff are all stuff that are put into his movies. And we're going to just briefly go over all of his movies, throughout this episode. But just leading up into getting to that point, we all know that his technical first movie is Reservoir Dogs. But there was one before that. Yeah. There was one before that.
Was it Four Rooms?
No, it was called My Best Friend's Birthday.
Oh, My Best Friend's, yeah.
In 1987, but what happened is the final reel of the film was almost completely destroyed in a lab fire while he was editing it. And he wasn't able to finish it. And I think the screenplay still exists of it, or like the screenplay was later formed the basis for True Romance. Yeah. What is interesting is that he's not only a film director, but he's also a very good screenplay writer.
Well, yeah, he wrote a few screenplays before he really started, and he was also known for being a punch-up writer. Like he would go and work on other movies and just go and punch up the scripts. I think he'd done a couple. I think he did some work on Armageddon, like dialogue-wise. I think it was either that or it was The Rock.
It was The Rock.
Yeah,
where he did.
But he did Natural Born Killers. He wrote that. He wrote True Romance, and.
I mean, he also wrote From Dusk Till Dawn. He
also acted in that.
He's actually done a lot of acting.
I was going to say, let's not forget, Tarantino's also an actor, too.
He is also an actor.
He's not a great one. No.
Not a great one. Apparently, I've heard once upon a time, I don't know if this is true, is that he wanted to be an actor more so than he wanted to be a filmmaker. Obviously, he chose the right path in being a writer-filmmaker than being an actor. It's not that he's bad, because sometimes I think he's very good, but I think he's really good in his own work when he's doing his own dialogue and things like that. Because I think looks like he's having a lot of fun more than anything else.
Sure, yeah.
He's done, he wrote 2 episodes for CSI's, crime scene investigations. He's written a bunch of stuff. He's written, I think he technically has credit for the From Dusk Till Dawn series. I think he has, for writing some episodes there. But yeah, he's acted in a bunch of things. He was on an episode of Golden Girls way back when.
Yeah.
He was...
He was an Elvis impersonator.
Yeah, he was an Elvis impersonator.
Yeah.
He was, of course, in his first film, Reservoir Dogs. He was in a bunch of, smaller indie films. Sleep With Me, Somebody to Love. He's also in Desperado. He has that scene in Desperado.
Scene. Yeah. He's
that one scene where he's just telling that piss joke.
Well, yeah, him and Robert Rodriguez were buddies.
Yeah, really. Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Smith were all really close friends, because they all came up at that same time. They were all at the film festival circuit around that same time. I know specifically, El Mariachi and Reservoir Dogs came out around the same time. Pulp Fiction and Clerks were out around the same time, and I know Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith both worked in Miramax for most of their careers, pretty much I know Quentin Tarantino did pretty much until the Weinstein Company went under, because Harvey Weinstein's a trash human being, what I mean, when that whole thing went south. But I know Kevin Smith left years ago. He had a falling out with Harvey Weinstein, but yeah, there's a whole backstory there, but that's something for a different episode. We just kind of want to stay focused on just the film aspect of Quentin Tarantino. So, Reservoir Dogs, let's just get into it. Now that we've kind of got that backstory out of the way, came out, I think, in 1992. So, we're talking 25 years ago? More than that? No, 27 years ago? In 1992. And this movie is kind of a dark comedy gangster heist film.
Movie, yeah.
Heist movie. It reminds me a lot of The Asphalt Jungle or Rafifi, something like that. And it's also him starting out experimenting with non-linear plot formatting, which is something that he would do several times during his career, and this is kind of one of those times where it worked very, very well. Sometimes it can be used, and sometimes it can be very confusing, but Tarantino has such a grasp on just story placement and just things like that, that there's enough there to keep you connected, and Reservoir Dogs has a lot of that in it. But this film is notorious for having a lot of actors in it that would then go on to be bigger actors.
Yeah.
Although the veteran anchor of that film is Harvey Keitel, who was already a relatively well-known person.
He was the guy that helped get that movie made.
Yes, I think he also helped fund it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I think Monty Hellman was a producer on that film, or executive producer, I can't remember. Monty Hellman did the film Two Lane Blacktop, The Shooting, or The Shootist, and the Ride the Whirlwind, which are all films that are in the Criterion Collection.
Yeah.
Monty Hellman was part of that whole Scorsese, Spielberg era of the New Hollywood back in the day. Probably films that Tarantino watched over and over again. And so that film, going back and looking at that movie, it sort of still really holds up.
Yeah,
it really holds
up.
up.
If I pitched it to you today, you'd probably be like, I don't want to see that. Like, if I told you that this was a heist movie without seeing the heist, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, I don't want to see that movie.
Yeah, it looks almost like a first film, or not a student film. I don't want to say that, but it's like, okay, we don't have the money to show off the heist, but what can we do to make this movie possible? Okay, we'll just have everybody talking in a warehouse the whole time for 90 minutes almost, and but throughout we'll have flashbacks of each character, and so you'll get to see who each character is and their relation to this heist.
Well, this is
really really good.
Yeah, this is definitely his tightest movie because of how short it is.
Oh yeah,
his movies would continue to blow and get bigger and bigger as he.
I would say this and Death Proof are probably his two.
Yeah. And that's only because he did it. It's a double feature.
Not only that, because the runtime is shorter. Yeah. I mean, his other films are much more heavy lifting and longer films. But this movie has just people who starred in it. It has Harvey Keitel, like we've said. It's got
Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi in a young role. Steve Buscemi was working with the Coen brothers back then.
You got
it's got Chris Penn, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth. Lawrence Tierney, who's a veteran actor. He's from old Hollywood. Like, he was doing movies in the 40s and 50s. And he was a kind of a crazy guy here. And, of course, Quentin's in it as himself. And what is interesting is that all the dudes in it, they don't have character names. They're just like... they just have colors.
It's
like
Mr. an old
Blonde.
School... Yeah, it's like a classic film. It's like a classic film. He would continue to do this in, like, in like a Kill Bill where he, The Bride...
It's kind of an old school thing where it's not the characters, it's
their profession situation. Or their nickname or
it's like their characters don't matter. It's their
role,
like their role, what they're doing in the movie and all that.
The
kind
boatman,
of stuff. But I meant just like in terms of like their importance in the movie. It's like we don't like, for example, I don't need to know what Harvey Keitel's name is. I know he says it in the movie, but I don't need to know it for it to have any bearing on how it affects me watching the movie.
It plays into the plot, though, because they're not supposed to know each other's name based off of protecting each other for the heist.
Correct, correct.
But
the one thing that became very apparent while watching this movie is that Tarantino's dialogue is incredible.
Yeah.
It's fast. I was going to almost say Fast and Furious, but it's fast. It has a great pace to it, and just the back and forth between the characters, the timing of it is all really fantastic. He's taking a lot from people like Howard Hawks, from people like Frank Capra, from people from the old golden age of Hollywood who would have very fast-talking movies.
Yeah.
He's taking a lot of that and putting it into his films, but he's giving it a modern tone because these movies are R-rated. They can talk in very non-PC ways and say very non-PC things. And going back, you can see where, from a modern contextual lens, that some of his dialogue is problematic. There's a lot of swear words in it, a lot of sexual stuff in it, misogyny. You can definitely glean that from it as well. But I think just from a technical standpoint, not a lot of movies were doing that back then. And it was kind of a revitalization of, this type of heavy talking movie. His movies are very much heavy dialogue based. The dialogue drives the movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The next movie, my favorite, Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah.
Man, I've seen this movie at least a dozen times.
This was my first. This I'm pretty sure was my first Tarantino. I honestly didn't get into Tarantino until a lot later into my. I mean, I was like 21 or 22 when I first.
I think I was too.
Yeah, and it was a friend that showed it to me, and I was over his house watching it, and like I didn't even get to finish the movie on the first go through, and it pissed me off because we stopped. He had to leave, and I had to go, and we stopped at the part with Bruce Willis getting on the bike and leaving.
Man.
Zed's dead. That's where I had to stop watching.
You guys were almost done.
Yeah, I know. I was like, what the fuck? Can we finish this shit?
It was like a half an hour left in the movie.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I didn't get into Tarantino until around that age either. When I first started collecting DVDs, like around 2007, his stuff was kind of the first stuff I bought just from hearing his name. I had never seen any of his stuff before. I think I had seen snippets of Kill Bill, maybe, but I don't think I'd ever seen the whole movie. I don't think I'd ever seen one of his whole movies. And I bought like Reservoir Dogs and I bought Pulp Fiction right off the bat. I don't remember if I bought Kill Bill and Kill Bill Volume 1. I probably did. I can tell you definitely one of the last movies I bought from him was Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
That didn't, that wasn't Django or The Hateful Eight. But yeah, Pulp Fiction, when I first saw it, from a first stance and not knowing anything about Tarantino, is it a tough watch? I would say it is. Because there is so much dialogue, there's so many things happening, it's non-linear.
Yeah.
It's non-linear, but the more you watch the movie, I think after two viewings, you can piece together the timeline yourself in your head.
Yeah, you can start to understand how things fall in place.
How things fall into place. And this movie, of course, introduced his long-term actor attachment with Samuel L. Jackson, who is just absolutely fantastic in the movie. Just
got nominated for an Oscar.
Nominated for an Oscar. And this was also the film that got Tarantino his first Oscar. I believe he won
for writing.
For best, I want to say original screenplay. That's going to be my assumption. Because pretty much almost all of his screenplays are best original screenplays. Yeah. Except for Jackie Brown, which is an adaptation. I think everything else is pretty much original. Yeah, this film won for best
original from a certain standpoint.
Yeah, I guess from a certain standpoint. He is. There is a lot of people out there who don't like Tarantino because they feel he's just ripping off the films from the past.
I enjoyed Tarantino. I don't put him up as high as a lot of people do, but because I do agree that he does spend a lot of time just reliving the past and putting it in his movies, and it's fun and everything, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily the most original filmmaker. I just think he's got an interesting point of view.
Right. I'll say this also, he is not the only one, and he's not going to be the last one, because pretty much every filmmaker takes things from the past.
Oh, definitely,
and incorporates it into
but he's
films.
He's a little bit on the nose.
He's a little bit on the nose. I mean, you'll see. I mean, especially with like Kill Bill, like Lucy Liu's character in Kill Bill is clearly Lady Snowblood. Like it's really obvious. Yeah. Clearly.
Oh,
we'll get to that. But in Pulp Fiction is when he really arrived on the scene. Like his star power was pretty much there because you get all that critical acclaim. Reservoir Dogs was highly acclaimed as well amongst critics, but now Pulp Fiction, I think, made over $200 million at the box office. And it's small budgeted movie.
This is an $8 million movie, I think.
There's no stars in that movie. I mean, John Travolta was a big star, but his popularity had waned.
His flame had gone out.
This was his comeback movie, essentially. Yeah. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson was nobody at that time. Of course, he had been in movies. He had been in some Spike Lee stuff. He had been in, Coming to America back in the 80s. He's got that one scene where he's robbing McDonald's. But I mean, this was another one that kind of put him on the scene. Also, who else in the movie? Ving Rhames. I think this was before he was in Mission Impossible. So
it was.
He's in that movie.
Uma Thurman.
Uma Thurman. She wasn't popular at the time. This is certainly another film that was a launching point for her. But Tim Roth, again, was another one. He was in this film. Amanda Plummer. I mean, so many. Phil LaMarr was in the movie. He plays Marvin. Phil LaMarr is the guy who's done, like, voice acting for, like, every children's programming in the last 20 years. Bruce Willis, like we've said, was probably the biggest star. He had already done 2 Die Hard movies, I want to say, by this point. Yeah.
He was... It was right before he did his third one.
Yeah, so he had already done 2. Yeah, so he's
I mean,
probably the
him and
biggest
John
person.
Travolta were the two biggest stars.
Yeah,
Because
I'm telling
you could
watching-
argue John Travolta was a bigger star, but I mean,
I said this when we did our spotlight on The Sixth Sense, but man, go back and watch Bruce Willis in the '90s, where he actually cared, because he was really acting his ass off in a lot of those movies, and he's really good in this film. He has one sequence, a part of this in the movie where the movie structure where each part is kind of a little vignette, but they all connect somehow. They all take place, and you see other characters in each vignette sometimes, so you see the connections there. It's a really good film. It's a dark comedy as well. There's a lot of dark comedy in it. There's part gangster film in it as well.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's fantastic.
it was definitely an evolution.
It's one of his most well-known films.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most talked about and just referenced movies. And this is when you started. I think after this is when you start to get a lot of Quentin Tarantino copycats.
Yeah,
a lot of people who really take a lot from him and do, and try to emulate.
There was what was the movie with the two brothers? I'm
gonna imagine. Yeah.
The Boondock Saints.
Boondock Saints is a Tarantino ripoff.
Yeah.
Film.
Well,
that guy Troy Duffy's not a good filmmaker.
No.
He really is.
The main thing that people took from his films, of course, were his the writing, the dialogue style, the fact that his characters talk about nonsense basically, and that's kind of what he puts in his movies. Is his characters will talk about almost nothing related to the plot. No, just random everyday things.
And we'll get to that when we get to Once Upon a Time in America. That was one of the things that kind of confused me about why people were upset, like, oh, the movie is plotless. And I'm like, you watch Tarantino's movies?
Have you not seen a Tarantino movie?
His movies aren't about plot. His movies typically aren't plot-based.
Yeah.
And if you go back and watch Pulp Fiction, it's not really plot-based. I mean, like I said, it's a fractured plot, so you're just kind of seeing moment to moment. But like you said, the dialogue is where it's at. I'm trying to transition from that to a movie that's kind of one of his most plot-based movies is Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
In the sense that it is an adaptation of a novel.
Yeah, his only adaptation, yeah.
It's an adaptation of a novel by the late Elmore Leonard, who has had 26 of his literary works adapted into some form or another. And the book that it's based on is called Rum Punch. Uh-huh. Apparently, when Tarantino was a kid, he actually got caught shoplifting an Elmore Leonard novel, I think from like a market or something, I think when he was a teenager, so there's that connection already.
Yeah.
And apparently Elmore Leonard really liked the adaptation
movie.
Here. Another movie that was an adaptation of Elmore Leonard, which kind of happened around the same time, was Out of Sight, the movie by Steven Soderbergh, the one that had George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. Highly recommend that movie if people haven't seen it. The Michael Keaton character has a cameo in that movie that kind of connects the two. He's in like one scene, but yeah, he's in it. So Jackie Brown is his film that is his kind of not love letter, but kind of just like statement about him loving the blaxploitation films of the 1970s. Of which Jackie Brown, of which Pam Grier, who portrays Jackie Brown, was a prominent part of.
Yeah.
She was in a lot of those B-C movies of that time. And movies like the Big Bird Cage and Booties in the Jungle and things like that. I'm gonna go back.
The one I hear is Coffee. Coffee's a big one.
Yeah, things like Black Mama, White Mama, Coffee. I mean, what's Scream, Blackula Scream.
Say that one title
Sheba
again,
Baby.
the booty one.
Which one?
What's the booty movie again?
I don't know. I
just want to hear you say it again.
I think they were just called Booties in the Jungle movies.
Booties in the Jungle.
I've heard that from people say that. Don't ask me. But some of these movies are like Foxy Brown.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Like Austin Powers 3, Beyonce's
She's basically supposed to be Foxy
She's
Brown.
Foxy Cleopatra.
Yeah, like the Big Dollhouse and women. There's literally a movie called Women in Cages. I mean,
there you go.
They're these blaxploitation movies that they're B movies. They the B movies of that era, which we've kind of talked about when we talked about a little bit of Roger Corman and all those types of movies. But blaxploitation had things like Dolomite and movies like that. and she was a prominent actress of that time, of that era. And of course, by the 1990s, no one, knew who she was. She was still working, but her career wasn't relevant, if you will. I mean, she was in. I mean, before this, she was in like Escape from LA. She was in Mars Attacks. I mean, she was doing like a lot of TV series and whatnot. But this was kind of a resurgence of her career, or yet again a comeback of her career, in the 90s, as well as Robert Forster.
Yeah.
Who has just recently passed away, but this was another comeback for him. He was kind of just a character actor from back then as well.
Yeah.
He was never kind of a leading man. He's not a Robert Redford or, a Warren Beatty
it's what
or something like
Tarantino
that.
does, man. Tarantino likes to resurrect the careers of certain filmmakers that he connected, actors and actresses he connected
all people, to. Yeah, it's all people whose movies he watched when he was younger, and he's like, oh man, I can work with these people now. What are they doing now? Let me put them in my movie. That's why we see Bruce Dern in The Hateful Eight. We saw Bruce Dern in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where that's someone who was in movies back then as well. But he was not an A-list star. He was not a leading man, although he was in movies. He's in a great movie called Driver, which is basically the premise for Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive, where he's in that. Bruce Dern's in that movie, but he's all part of that generation as well with Jack Nicholson and all that. But so he has a penchant for revitalizing people's careers, like you said. But in this movie, he also re-employs Samuel L. Jackson, who has a fantastic, I believe, fake ponytail, as well as fake rat tail chin thing.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's called.
Little chin goatee.
Yeah, I think it is fake, but yet again, I was rewatching this movie the other night. The dialogue is still just so fantastic.
Snappy, man.
It's a long movie. It's 2 hours and 34 minutes, which is the same runtime as Pulp Fiction, but the difference between Jackie Brown and I think Pulp Fiction is Jackie Brown is more plot-based, so therefore moves a little slower. Yeah. You can kind of feel the 2.5 hours a little more. But the character interactions, I think, are great. The plot, I think, is interesting. Robert De Niro is in the film in one of his most understated performances, where for at least 3/4 of the movie, he doesn't have any dialogue and is just making faces. Yep. That's all he's doing.
He's very uncomfortable in that movie. He just feels uncomfortable the whole movie.
He's got this big mustache. He's like an ex-con. And
he's trying not to get in trouble, but then he can't help but get pulled back in.
Pretty much. Bridget Fonda is in the film, who is the daughter of Peter Fonda. She's the niece of Jane Fonda. She's the granddaughter of Henry Fonda. Yeah. So you have that old school
lot of history
Hollywood family connection right there. And of course, Tarantino knows who Peter Fonda, Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda are, of course.
And I mean, let's not forget we have young Chris Tucker in this movie.
Young Chris Tucker is in the beginning of this movie. There's a whole sequence at the beginning of this movie where it revolves around the Chris Tucker character, and it's just like, and it doesn't quite have a bearing on the movie. It's just really fantastic.
He's a means to an end.
He's a means to an end.
He gives you a little bit of more on Sam Jackson's character.
He does.
How far he'll go.
What is interesting though is I'm watching this movie like last night. Rewatching it actually, and you get an hour. It's not until like an hour into the movie where the main plot actually like really kicks in. Yeah. And that's something that's really interesting with Tarantino's films is, especially his longer films. Well, mostly his longer films is he takes his time. He takes his time setting up situations, setting up dialogue, just having characters interact with one another. And yet again, it's not conducive to the plot. He's not setting up plot points. He's just having people having conversations, talking to each other, making cultural references. The movie opens with Samuel L. Jackson just watching a video about really attractive women selling guns, and he's just going off about
AK-47.
AK-47 when you have to kill absolutely everybody in the room, except
every motherfucker in the room.
Yeah,
I'll say it for you. Yeah, I'll say it for you.
Except no substitute. And then he's like talking about the 45. He's like, everybody wants to have the 45 because the killer had a 45. But what people don't know is that the 45 has a jamming problem. And then he's talking about like, oh yeah, I buy it for this and I sell it for that, and it's just like what you're learning is that he's a gun runner and a drug smuggler and all that kind of stuff. He's yet again a nefarious character, which is really interesting. Is that the three films that we've talked about so far, they all have really like morally bad characters at their center for the most part, and yet you still watch it and you're still enjoy
compelled.
the movie, at
Yeah,
least from
yeah.
my perspective.
Yeah.
Granted, Jackie Brown's also, someone who is not exactly morally, bright. She's smuggling drugs back and forth to Mexico and back because she's a flight
But she's the
attendant.
most. But
You know
she's
what I
the
mean?
most empathetic.
But
like,
she's doing it because she's got a shitty job and she needs the money and all this kind of stuff.
She
I
seems
mean,
the least bad.
yeah, the least bad. Of course, Robert Forster, I think, is the
Is
white knight
the
of
nicest.
the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
The white knight of the movie, and their back and forth is really, really interesting because they have like a kind of a romance thing happening, or unrequited.
She's more
romance
using
happening.
him,
It's really
but
good.
I mean, yeah.
She is. But it's Pam Grier.
you
If she
know,
wants to use me to make money.
Sure, yeah,
she can
why
use me
not?
to make money.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
not?
But these first three films have all kind of been in that kind of close in that same genre of crime movie.
Really, yeah.
You know,
Crime, dark comedy, morally gray characters,
Yeah.
very dialogue heavy, very, they're all of a certain ilk. They're all
Yeah.
very much very similar to one another. But then we get like a 5-year break,
I was gonna say we get a break, and then now we go dramatically different.
dramatically different. Now it is the early 2000s, and we have this movie, Kill Bill.
Yes.
It's his really long revenge movie, basically. And this movie...
And this kid, now we're going ahead and saying one movie as in
Yeah,
one
I
and
do want to
two.
mention it was split up because it's like over 4 hours long, so they wanted to split it in half. Part 1 comes out, and then Part 1 came out, I want to say 2003.
I think it was a year later, right?
Yeah, the other one came out in 2004. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Let me make sure about that. But yes, 2003 and 2004.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is that if you watch them as just one whole film back to back, you can, as the whole bloody affair, as they say. Or if you want to watch them separately, you can do that as well because there are two different. Like there's a way to break them up to where they're two different movies.
Yeah.
Part 1 feels very much like a martial arts kung fu, Chinese kung fu film as well as Japanese samurai film, revenge story. The second film feels very much like a spaghetti western, also revenge story. You know what I mean? So there's the difference between the two. I believe RZA from the Wu-Tang. This is when RZA and Tarantino kind of became friends. I think RZA did the music for these films, at least for the first part, because people who don't know this, the Wu-Tang Clan and RZA and all those guys really love Chinese martial arts films. They're really into that. If you ever listen to their movies, Enter the 36 Chamber and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the reference point for where Tarantino got his influence from for these movies, for Kill Bill. It's in those old Shaw Brothers types of martial arts movies. But what we have here is Uma Thurman, once again being in one of his films, and she is Beatrix Kiddo, or the bride. And she is someone who is initially thought to be killed by someone called Bill, and she wants to get her revenge. Hence the title of the movie, Kill Bill. And it's really stylized.
Yes.
This is probably his most stylized movie up to this point. To the point where I think like everybody thought afterwards his movies were going to be this stylized.
Well, I think it was a shock at first because he hadn't done anything like this yet.
No, and he had done a little bit of homage type stuff when it came, I think, to some of the violence he had put in like Pulp Fiction, where Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta characters are shooting those kids or whatever, and then the screen like flashes red. Like that's something that's an homage to, I believe, Sergio Leone or something like that. And so he's used those homages before, but here he takes all of the homages from all of those movies that we've talked about and dials it up to 11 and gives it to us. You know what I mean? And it's probably his most fun and easy watching film. Maybe not easy watching, but it's most entertaining.
I'd say it's his most accessible movies.
I would say entertaining. At least Kill Bill Part 1 is the shorter
version, yeah.
It's the shorter one.
I think it's like an hour 50 minutes.
Yeah, it only clocks in, like Steven said, hour and 51 minutes. The second one is the one that's much longer and much slower.
It goes more into the backstory a little bit.
It does.
You know, it slows down in the second
It's 2
part,
hours. Yeah. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Yeah.
And I heard doing my research that there's a 3-hour cut of Kill Bill Part 2.
Yeah, that's the whole bloody affair thing.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, that's putting them together, and there's extra footage, I think.
Yeah, and he showed like that cut of the movie at the 2004 Cannes Film Festival when he was on the jury, and he showed that at one of the screenings. I'd sit down for a 3-hour
It's the thing is, it's not really available.
That's the thing.
It's you can't buy it anywhere. It's like it's.
I don't think you can. I'm pretty
I've tried.
Sure you can.
I've tried. I can't find it.
You can get Kill Bill. I mean, the closest we can get is Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 on Blu-ray, and then watch them back to back.
Yes.
That's pretty much the way you can see them. I don't know. I know they did a Grindhouse one where they combined both of them. There's a collector's edition that I'm looking at right now that just says Grindhouse on it. And you have Planet Terror and you have Death Proof on it. But Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 are some of people's favorite of his films. I would just say, for the sake of argument, let's say they're all just one big movie.
Well, that's the way he. That's the
way he says it, and honestly, it is one whole big story because. Spoiler alert: at the end of part 1, she doesn't end up killing Bill, so you gotta get to part 2 to get that conclusion of the story. But it's a large tapestry, and once again, you have a really good cast: Uma Thurman, Lucy Liu, Vivica A. Fox, Daryl Hannah, the late David Carradine, Michael Madsen once again. It's a really, really good film. Michael Parks is in it as well.
Sonny Chibo's in the first one.
Sonny Chiba's in the first one. It's you get a lot of influence in this, and what is kind of interesting about it is like I said before, with him taking all of these influences and putting them in his films, you can go back and watch so much of his stuff, or so much of the stuff that he gets the influence from. Like if you want to watch Lady Snowblood, you can watch Lady Snowblood. If you want to watch the 36th Chamber, the Shaw Brothers movies, all that kind of stuff, you can. You want to watch spaghetti westerns, you can. Sergio Leone.
There's also a really great animated sequence that tells the backstory.
There's an anime sequence, with Lucy Liu's character's backstory, which is really bloody and brilliant, and looks fantastic. The movie is, of course, this is where Tarantino, I guess, gets the name for being excessively violent, because at the end of the first part, there's a huge...
Crazy 88. We call it the Crazy 88 scene.
Yeah, the soundtrack in the movie is fantastic as well. The characters that are in it are really, really good. But man, these are movies we all have to save for spotlights later, because they're all so much to digest and break down with all of them. But moving on from Kill Bill, there's not quite a time lapse. Moving on from Kill Bill, I think, is when we get to Death Proof, right?
Yes.
His second. Actually, this is a good part to go back and do this, because we forgot. The anthology movie, The Four Rooms, he teamed with Robert Rodriguez. His buddy Robert Rodriguez. He teamed up with him and 2 other directors, and why won't it let me look at it? Oh, here it is. Four Rooms, the segment, The Man from Hollywood. But it's Robert Rodriguez, Allison Anders, Alexander Rockwell. Those are the 4 that are in there, and he once again reteams with Robert Rodriguez, who he also teamed with on From Dusk Till Dawn, where he was an actor in the movie, and he gets spoiler alert, he gets killed off pretty early in that movie, but he's actually a scumbag in that movie. He deserved to get killed. It's actually his death kind of kicks off the main plot of that movie. It's really important to know this, but spoiler alert there. So yet again, teaming with Robert Rodriguez to make Grindhouse. Now, Grindhouse is basically an homage to the old school B-C movie Grindhouse films that you would see in drive-in movie theaters back in the 60s, back in the 70s. Think Roger Corman once again, and think of like over-the-top violence, sex, nudity, gore, stuff like that.
Robert Rodriguez himself would go on to do more movies like this, like the Machete movies.
Yeah, the Machete movies definitely are right out of this. I want to say Machete, maybe because they did a bunch of fake movie trailers while they were showing these movies, and they did I don't know if Machete was one, but I don't know if Hobo with a Shotgun.
Yeah, Hobo with a Shotgun. They ended up doing a movie for it, and it was one of the trailers. Yeah,
and there was a Thanksgiving trailer that was shot by what's his face? He was in Inglourious Bastards. Oh man, he did the Green Inferno.
You're talking about Eli Roth?
Eli Roth, yes, Eli Roth, who not that great of a director, but we'll get to that different point, different time. But yeah, he directed like one of those as well, which people want to see a movie from, and so he did the second half, which was Death Proof. The first one is Planet Terror, which I think is kind of like a zombie apocalypse one. And Planet Terror has the character of Stuntman Mike, portrayed by Kurt Russell. and he kind of goes around like driving like a stunt car and murdering women while driving around the stunt car. Yet again, it's a short movie, a lot of dialogue based, but it's a movie that probably stars people you are aware of. It stars, of course, Kurt Russell, but Zoe Bell is in it. Zoe Bell is actually a stunt woman, and she's kind of become Tarantino's stunt coordinator, and she's also
primarily
makes cameos.
She primarily did stunts for Uma Thurman.
Yeah, she did stunts for Uma Thurman, but she's kind of made cameo appearances as an actress.
She started to
movies.
be in the movies themselves, yeah.
Yeah, Rosario Dawson's in it. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's also in the movie. Rose McGowan, I think, is in the movie as well. Yep. Eli Roth's also in the movie. I'm just looking down. Yeah, but, yeah, it's one of his shorter films, and, Steven, I'm going to get a lot of shit for this. Actually, the movie is an hour and 53 minutes, but I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this. If I had to rank my Tarantino movies, this unfortunately may be at the bottom. And I don't hate the movie. I like the movie a lot, actually.
I don't hate the movie, but it is my least favorite.
What's crazy is, like, it's tough to rate. I have to rate Tarantino with like an exclaimer saying like I kind of love all of his movies, but if I had to rank them in terms of favorability of ones I like the most versus least, Death Proof I think would be at the bottom.
Yeah,
and that's not because I don't like the movie, because I really like the movie a lot, but that's just me in general. And also I would say it's an underrated movie in his overall oeuvre as well. And I'm saying that with someone who ranks it at the bottom.
This movie also, being that it has a lot of women in it, really shows off his fetish for females' feet.
That's something that's been right around since Pulp Fiction.
It's been there since the beginning, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the first time we see Uma Thurman in that film, we see her, we don't see her face, we see her mouth going against the microphone to ask Vincent Vega to come in and make a drink and all that stuff. But when we see her, there's just a tracking shot of her walking across the floor with just her feet.
Yes.
And Once Upon a Time I think by this point, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was doing it just to, like, mess with people. Like, saying, like, I know that you all know it, so I'm just going to do it again.
He's done it in every movie since Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, it's a thing.
I mean, literally, there's a scene where, in Inglourious Bastards, where, there's a shoe scene where you got to take off the shoe off the foot of Diane Kruger, and then you put, there's so many scenes.
There are. And hey, I mean, if you got a sexual fetish out there, as long as it
doesn't
hurt anybody.
I'm just surprised Tarantino has continued to do it in every movie.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, he's not breaking any laws, and you're not, doing anything that's terrible, have at it. But moving on, because we don't want to spend too much time here, because the next one's kind of a biggie, and that is Inglourious Bastards.
Yes. Which
came out in 2009. His previous film had come out in 2007 in Death Proof. He also did a small guest directorial spot in Sin City. It's just that it's a one scene in the car with Clive Owen and Benicio del Toro. But I guess we have to mention that just because. But this big one here is Inglourious Bastards. This may be people's favorites.
It's definitely my favorite. I think it's my favorite.
I waver right now between Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards. I don't know if Pulp Fiction I'm holding on to it because it's a movie I've seen so many times and I have like an attachment to it. But Inglourious Bastards is pretty fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that movie is the screenplay, the acting.
Well, I mean, I would say the biggest thing for a lot of us is the introduction of Christoph Waltz.
It really is. I have no idea who Christoph Waltz was before this film. I mean, we also have also starts his. They've only done 2 movies. Brad Pitt is in it. Melanie Laurent, Eli Roth. Once again, he's the Danny Donowitz, the Jew Bear. He's in the movie. Michael Fassbender. This was 2009. This was before Michael Fassbender was really known. I mean, this was before he was in X-Men. This was before Shane. This is before anything else, really. Diane Kruger, like you said, is in the film. It's BJ. There's a lot of people in here, but yeah, this screenplay is amazing. Just upon rewatching this movie, this screenplay is incredible. The acting is incredible. It's playing into, once again, Quentin Tarantino's kind of fantasy fiction world where he likes to play with history, because he does the same thing once again in Once Upon a Time in America, where It's a combination of fact and fiction. It's a fantasy alternative history. There's a lot of people out there who have made this argument, and I think people have kind of adopted it, is that all of his movies are connected in some way.
Yeah.
Where the Red Apple cigarettes show up, I think, in nearly all of his movies. I'd have to do a whole investigation on that.
Yeah, there's some videos you can look up out there where people show you all the connections and things, and
Right.
I think it's a little loose. I think the connections are loose. They're just good enough connections where you can maybe believe.
Well, I do think, I mean, the most solid connection for me is Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, where Michael Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs is the brother of the John Travolta character in Pulp Fiction. They have the same last name.
Well, there was a time where
connection.
there was a time where he wanted to do a Vega Brothers movie,
right?
And then it never happened, and now they're both kind of too old.
I guess. Yeah. Also, both of their. I mean,
well, that's the thing is they're too old now. If they were going to do it, it'd have to be a prequel, and now they're too old. Yeah.
Now, I mean, John Travolta, whatever nowadays, but yeah, Inglourious Basterds is star-studded. Like I said, the story is really good. This is another film that I think kind of relies heavily on plot, more so than some of his films in the past. I would say even Kill Bill is kind of plot heavy as well, but there's a lot of plot, but it's more spectacle. I think in that film, when it comes to the action, I think in Kill Bill is kind of his. Kill Bill, Death Proof has action as well, and this film has action as well. But Kill Bill has a lot of action to the point where that really drives that movie along. At least that first part. That second part is very heavily dialogue based, very heavily plot based. But Inglourious Basterds does have a heavy plot as well, and it's a more larger, expanding plot. There's a lot of things happening. Christoph Waltz's character's doing stuff. Brad Pitt and his crew are doing stuff. Melanie Laurent's character is doing stuff with their whole theater and their whole murder plot that's in that movie. If you haven't seen any of these movies, and we're just throwing random things out at you, go back and watch these movies. Marathon them. Have a Quentin Tarantino marathon.
Yes.
Just go through all of them, because it's a lot of fun. And this podcast will make a lot more sense. We're under the assumption that most of you out there have seen
if you
Tarantino's
clicked on this
movies.
podcast, you've probably seen all his movies.
I mean, I would say his films are the ones I would start with if you're trying to get into, like, cinema, or trying to be more serious about cinema, and you want to see more movies that aren't necessarily the mainstream superhero tentpole
see them
stuff.
movies, and then maybe watch some behind the scenes or commentaries, so that you can maybe get the context of what he was talking about in these movies.
I'll say this: each Blu-ray or DVD does have a lot of special features that go into the movies. Typically, I think Kill Bill is actually the one that's lacking the most, where it's literally just things like, I think it's just RZA talking about the music. But anywho, but most of the other ones are pretty much got a lot of stuff that shows you production, it shows you cast interviews. And Tarantino's, for someone who is, very guarded when it comes to, I think, his work, in the sense that, he doesn't want people to, leak his screenplays, which we'll get to when we get to his next movie, is that, like...
Well, not his next movie, but the movie after his next movie. Because Django.
Yes, Django. Yeah. The movie after his next movie. You're right. I accidentally skipped one where... Like, when it comes time to doing, like, press tours and interviews and all that kind of stuff, there's, like, probably hours of footage on YouTube of him just talking about his movies and movies in general. There was a whole thing when Hateful Eight came out, he and Paul Thomas Anderson had this whole talk about, like, just what things we talked about before, like CinemaScope and, like, Cinerama Dome and, like, 35,
he just shot on 70 millimeter.
Yeah, and they had a whole discussion about all that kind of, like, stuff they used to do back then with, like, roadshow movies and the movies that felt like rides and whatnot in 3D and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so there's so much stuff out there. But Inglourious Basterds, one of his best, can't recommend it enough. His next film, he once again dips into a genre. I would say that Inglourious Basterds is his war movie. If you have to give that a genre, it's his homage to war films of yesteryear. Things like The Longest Day and Dirty Dozen and things like that, and all those types of movies, those World War II movies, which there were so many of them in the 40s and 50s and 60s.
I mean, the Inglourious Basterds was already a movie.
Yeah, Inglourious Basterds was literally already a movie.
Yeah.
So Django Unchained is his homage to spaghetti westerns, and it's his also. It's also a revenge film, and it's a film that, really, it was his kind of state. At least at the time, the way he rationalized it is that he wanted to make a movie, a spaghetti western set in the Deep South. This movie takes place in 1858. And he wanted to make kind of like a vengeful commentary, I guess, on slavery, American slavery.
Yeah.
And he said things like, America's doesn't really like to talk about it or deal with it in any way. So I'm going to make a spaghetti western movie about it. And a lot of people didn't really.
Like most of his movies, it was very controversial.
Right. Yeah, there are certain controversies to it because, there's been a whole there's been that debate pretty much for a long, long time, even before recent events. Do movies and TV shows and music impact these horrific crimes like mass shootings and things like that?
Yeah.
And they always ask Tarantino about that.
Yeah, we can get into it more when we talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's a whole other thing, yeah.
But yeah, with this movie, a lot of the controversy was around the N-word being used many times.
That's something that's actually come up in his films a lot.
Yes. Especially Spike Lee.
Word.
Spike Lee doesn't care for it.
There's a lot of people. I wouldn't say not only Spike Lee. Spike Lee didn't like the fact that he was treating the slavery era through the lens of a spaghetti western. He didn't like that at the time. But the N-word has been something he's used since Reservoir Dogs. Yeah. Used it then. He used it a lot in Pulp Fiction. His character in Pulp Fiction used it a lot. Samuel L. Jackson's character uses it profoundly a lot.
Yeah.
And it's something that is definitely controversial.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the more controversial things that he's done, and it's tough, man, because it's a word you shouldn't really say. There's no real context to where one should say that word, and in the movies, the character's saying it in such a brash way. Sometimes it's used for insult. Sometimes it's used in colloquial conversation. I mean, this is a whole.
It's a whole thing. We can go down a whole thing.
Yeah,
we can
all
do a whole episode
on
on it.
We gotta stay on.
But the thing is it's like it's a thing we're continuing to fight all the time, and especially with his movies, using that word during that time was like breathing. That was a word that was used all the time. So historically,
if we're talking about Django specifically, yes.
Historically, it kind of falls in line, but the problem is that it's Tarantino, a white director, making this movie, and that's the problem.
It's also a problem. I mean, in his other films, he used it a lot as well, and those weren't period pieces. But of course, back in 1858,
nobody wants to look at the movies in the context of how he's making the movies. These are obviously exploitation movies, but they don't like that he's making them.
Well, what is really unfortunate is that word is probably used in everyday conversation so brashly and so loosely more than it should be. Yeah. So that's something I think that he's highlighting.
I'm not saying it's okay. I don't use the word. I
just want to acknowledge that it is something that is used a lot in society and reality, and he's kind of taking that and putting it into his movies. And I don't know if he's commenting on its use so briskly that people should take notice of it.
I think the thing is people can't separate reality from movies like he can. People want to take the movies and put it into their everyday life like it's affecting them or it's an issue because it's like it's supposed to possibly influencing people, like you said. And to me, if you can't separate movies from reality, and if you don't want to see that, then just don't watch the movie. That's what I say.
Especially with a modern day contextual lens, the line between reality and movies has blurred significantly in terms of the way in which people analyze and talk about movies. They talk about these movies as if they're saying real world things. Well, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they are.
The big conversation is does film have a moral? Do filmmakers have a moral obligation to put things in their movies that are, quote unquote PC, or to be morally responsible because they don't want to influence people or give people bad ideas, or do they have that obligation? And I don't think they do.
I don't think they do either, simply because I view films as an art form, and I don't think art should be censored.
No, you're censoring no matter, because if you only made movies that promoted good things, quote unquote, the good things in the world, then
they get boring.
It would be boring, and it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be close to reality.
No.
And movies are supposed to blur that lines between reality and fiction.
Now, I will also say, I guess, devil advocate is like, if someone wants to criticize someone for putting something in their
nothing wrong
films,
with criticizing.
you have the right to do that entirely. Yeah. I mean, no one's saying you don't have the right to do that. But let's get back on track here. Let me push everything back to Django.
Let's get into the next film.
Spaghetti Western 1858. Django was portrayed by Jamie Foxx, and he's a former slave who's trying to get his wife, who's sold into slavery, and
he runs away and he becomes a bounty hunter with Christoph Waltz's character.
Christoph Waltz is in the movie. Once again, he won another Oscar for this film.
Which I think it should have went to DiCaprio, but I mean, that's just me.
DiCaprio's also in this movie. It's the first time DiCaprio's worked with Tarantino up to this point, and DiCaprio is amazing in this movie. Calvin Candy, and the way in which the racism is played in this movie, once again, is so over the top and so just absurd that it shows what racism is an absurd bullshit, like nonsensical, non-reasoning thing. It's garbage. It's
especially
garbage ideology.
In the scene with Don Johnson, where Don Johnson's
I mean, and there's Don Johnson. There's a dog scene where they're chasing an escaped slave. There's just every line of dialogue from Calvin Candy is just like absurdly racist.
The whole thing about the skull and the dents.
Yeah, and it shows that these people have these warped minds and ideologies that they're just garbage. And what's interesting is that it's also commenting on how that type of mindset like has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's even into today, that type of racial prejudice where people are seen as inferior and all that kind of stuff. But you also have, once again, Samuel L. Jackson is in this movie, and he's fantastic. Steven, and he's basically an Uncle Tom. He is a self-hating slave, essentially. He's someone who's sold into that type of mindset that he's basically... He's the living embodiment of that racist ideology. And it's really, really interesting what they do with his character in the movie. Yet again, a lot of people have problems with Tarantino taking this type of serious stuff, like we're talking about slavery, racism, and playing it for jokes and using comedy in it. But I think he's showing like I said, the absurdity in it. But it's a great film. It's a long movie. It's one that I saw in theaters and I really enjoyed.
Enjoyed that.
I've watched it a few times. I know some people don't like it, and that's fine.
It's in my top ones. It's definitely in my top 3 or 4.
Yeah,
maybe.
The pacing moves. It definitely. I know a lot of people like think it gets significantly better once you get to Candyland and you get to Calvin Candy and all that kind of stuff. But I like the whole movie as a whole. I think it's fantastic. But moving on, like you said,
the score too. Isn't the score?
Yes.
Ennio Morricone.
Oh no, that was
that's Hateful Eight. Yeah.
That's Hateful Eight.
But the score in Django is really good.
It is really.
He uses
good.
a lot of.
And yet again, he's taking all that influence from spaghetti westerns, Sergio Leone, and all those westerns from back then, and putting them into this film, including the score and certain things.
Certain themes.
The movie is bloody and violent. Yeah. You know what? I thought you said something.
No. I was just saying he uses certain themes from westerns in this.
For sure. Just even musically, like you said. But his next film is The Hateful Eight, which he almost didn't make because the first screenplay leaked online somewhere, or leaked to somebody, and apparently he only gave it to like 3 people to read. He only gave it to Bruce Stern, Michael Madsen, and somebody else, and Tim Roth, I think. Yeah, I think it was those 3, and somehow it ended up out in the ether, and he got pissed. He got real pissed.
The thing is they're all 3 still working in his movies.
Yeah, so I'm like, who leaked it then? If it wasn't those guys,
yeah.
Did somebody like intercept
Maybe
it?
he got hacked or something.
Or maybe somebody steal it from it. You know he writes that. He probably
writes
it
you're right. He didn't put it on
typewriter. You know he writes on a typewriter, probably. I mean, who really? I mean, he won't shoot his films digitally, let alone use a computer to write his stuff.
That was dumb.
Right, but.
That dude, like carves it into a piece of wood or something.
But after a couple of rewrites and reworkings of the script and changing endings, all that kind of stuff, he ended up doing it, and it's once again an homage to the old school Western roadshow type films. Basically, the roadshow edit of a movie back then was longer. It's a longer cut. It had an overture and had an intermission. Yeah. Basically like you would see movies back in the day. And the Roadshow edition showed around around the country in a few.
Well, yeah,
theaters and
I got a
whatnot.
chance to see this in on film,
Right.
in the roadshow version where there's there's an overture, then there's an intermission, and yeah, it was fantastic. I got a program.
Yeah, I know he added a few extra minutes. He added a
Yeah.
few more minutes, and he also like changed some dialogue and whatnot.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
throughout the movie. But this movie was particularly fascinating for me because just from a film history standpoint, I mean the old school westerns I find to be eternally fascinating. And I really was interested in what he could do, and also it's kind of his version of a play. It moves
it's-
basically a 3-hour play.
It's basically a western mixed with the Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah,
You know,
and
it's
it
a
all takes
whodunit,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
all takes place in one location.
Yeah.
What I really like about this movie is I think it was shot in like super CinemaScope, wasn't it? Like
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
It was
two-
a 70mm movie.
yeah, he used the same lenses that they used
Lawrence of
for
Arabia.
For Lawrence of Arabia, they had to
Yeah.
dig those things out of storage.
Yeah.
The one thing I also remember from this film is that just exhibiting the film was an issue because 2015. I mean,
Well,
they
no,
didn't-
nobody had
Nobody-
the
yeah.
technology anymore. Everybody switched to digital.
every theater had switched to digital. None of the projectionists knew what the heck to do with the one. They had to go back and they had to find the projectors that were equipped to project these movies in 70mm.
Well, yeah, I mean,
millimeter.
for
they
the,
didn't
for
have
the
them.
initial run where they showed it on film, they did, but
Yeah.
there was a digital version,
Oh
that-
yeah, there was a digital. There's always when these things are exhibited. I think there's always a digital backup just in
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
That happened a lot where the projector broke down, or there was a malfunction, or there was something wrong with the print or whatnot. And I think they were only able to exhibit it in like 100 cinemas all nationwide or something like that. I forgot
Yeah, it
what
was
the
very
number
limited in film.
It was very
yeah.
limited because they could only find so many projectors, and the people working at the theater didn't know what the heck they were doing
Yeah.
with it. I mean, as Stephen, you worked as a projectionist.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be there right near the end where I actually got to work with film, which was really cool. But yeah, even the theater I used to work at now is all digital. There's no
Yeah, they're all digital now, and so they had trouble exhibiting it. But and this was this is actually just going back, and because there's so much Tarantino fervor right now, a lot of people don't like this movie. Some people
yeah,
didn't.
a lot of people
Yeah.
think it's too long and it's boring, and it's not one I've gone back to watch a bunch.
I think I've seen it
I've maybe seen
twice.
it 2 or 3 times,
Yeah,
maybe.
same here.
But it's definitely interesting. I think part of it is maybe because he had just done a Western and that he kind of did
Could be.
another Western again.
It's also a film that is probably his most aggressively angry film. I don't know. That's just
That-
the way I get. That's the
well,
tone
that-
I get.
And very much, it's definitely all dialogue driven. Like
Oh
it's,
yeah, it's
all
like
dialogue.
it's 3 hours of dialogue.
it's only 2 locations. There's the carriage.
outside and inside.
Yeah, and then the inside, and that's it. Inside of the place that they go to, and you just hear a lot of people talking about stuff for 2.5 hours.
I'll say this: the dialogue is amazing.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I enjoy the movie to a certain extent. Like you said earlier, none of these movies are bad,
No.
but it's like different levels of good.
I'll say, and the cast is amazing. Samuel L. Jackson's back again. Kurt Russell's back again. Jennifer Jason Leigh is really good in the film.
I really like Walton Goggins.
Walton Goggins, who is kind of more of a character actor now, but he's getting a lot more work. And Damien Bashir, Tim Roth, Michael Madsen, Bruce Dern is in the film. Zoe Bell makes a small role in it. Yeah, it's very much the
Did
costume
you say Jennifer
drama.
Jason Leigh?
I did say Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Her role, she got nominated for this movie.
She did, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of problems with the way in which her character is treated in this movie. Because basically, for like 3 hours, she's constantly getting like beat up and hit.
This is a continuous thing throughout all
Yeah.
Tarantino movies. He doesn't have any problems beating up women. Now, I don't think that that means that Tarantino likes to beat women. I think that he just wants to make. To me, the way I see it is he's being equal with the violence, because men get their asses killed just as much as women do in his movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a whole argument here to be had, a whole episode to be had, but there's a lot of there are a lot of the ways in which he shoots. He has women in his films, and the way in which he has men in his films are two different there's two different distinctions.
Sure.
I mean, granted, his films, I would say, for the most part, this is me just generalizing, they're mostly catered toward a male audience.
Yes,
For
they're definitely...
I'm just generalizing, saying that. Do women enjoy his films? Of course they do. But I'm just saying, like, they do seem to have a masculinity to them.
Sure.
Even Kill Bill, which has a female lead, but she's out there, kicking ass and taking names, and, she's awesome and badass. You know what I mean? And, of course, women can be awesome and badass as well. But, I mean, men see that, like, oh, cool, let me go see this action scene where everybody's, cutting everybody up and whatnot. And also, of course, women can enjoy that as well. But there's a whole argument
can be made, and you can... We can never really be right because I can't talk to Tarantino right now in front of me.
No, I can't. And I would really want some female input into the ways in which they watch film, the way in which I would also like to discuss one day the way in which just society in general lets men and women watch two different kinds of movies. There's that perception. Yeah. You know what I mean? When we're young and when we're growing up, what movies are we watching comparing to what a young girl watches? Like, what is the difference? What are they allowed to see versus what we're allowed to see? There's a whole difference there.
Gender-specific films.
There very much is. We are... I mean, I think specifically in our generation, there was a lot of gender specificity in terms of what we were exposed to as children. Yeah. But that's a whole discussion for a different time. But The Hateful Eight, very long film. I really like it. Steven likes it. But I have to go back and revisit it. It's
definitely in the bottom half of his filmography.
I rated it really high when I saw it because I really was kind of like hyped into it at the time. But I think going back to rewatching it, it'll be lower rated for me. But not, like I said, it's not something that I hate. I know a lot of people put it. A lot of people put it dead last in their rankings.
I don't agree with that, but yeah.
So now we've gotten to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because that is his newest film. So. Hateful Eight came out in 2015, and now it's 2019. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is once again he's playing very much in the same vein, I think, as Inglourious Basterds, where it's his heightened fantasy, introspective version of a specific time period. This is 1969 Hollywood, and it stars Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, Margot Robbie's in the film, and there's a bunch of cameos by a lot of other actors and actresses.
Kurt Russell shows up for a little bit.
Kurt Russell's in it. They have an actor who plays Bruce Lee. I mean, it's
really... The late Luke Perry shows up a little bit.
Luke Perry is in one scene. Yes, he
Timothy
is.
Oliphant.
Yeah, Mr. Olifantastic is in it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's a lot of cameos by people playing the Manson family. There's a lot, like Harley Quinn Smith is in there. Maya Hawke is in there. I don't know why. For some reason on IMDb, Maya Hawke has like top billing, and she's in the movie for one scene. This is not
it's because she's very popular right now with Stranger Things.
Yeah, I think it has that whole popularity rating thing on IMDb that happens. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess because we don't want to go too much longer, we'll go non-spoiler with this.
Yeah, non-spoiler with it.
But basically, this is a movie that I think. And I agree. I definitely agree that this is probably his most self-indulgent film.
Oh yeah, he's pouring everything in this movie. I think is very much what he wants.
Yeah, usually when he's very much on the nose talking about something he loves, he hides it behind fictional characters.
Oh yes.
But in this movie, he set it in real life. It's a part of actual history, and is using real people and is deciding to change history on a very seminal moment in film history. Not just history of general history, but also the film industry. This was a big moment with the Manson murders.
Right. And what is interesting is like people think, it's a movie about the Charles Manson murders, and it's not. To be frankly honest with you, this is one of his most reserved films when it comes to both plot as well as style. Yeah. And it's just like Steven and I have talked about, it's kind of a hangout movie. Yeah. Where not a lot of things are happening that are significant to the plot of this movie. I mean, there's an A plot line, there's a B plot line, I think there's a C plot line. That C plot line, and I don't want to get into any specifics as it is, it's literally just the day in the life of some person. It's nothing that I think is directly involved with the plot at all. It's just there.
I just think
there's a lot of things
this
in
is
this
his
movie.
most thematically driven movie.
Yes, very thematically driven in the sense it's very thematically driven, very dialogue driven,
Yeah.
because you get the interaction between Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio I think is fantastic. Both of them are amazing in this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio is playing someone that is kind of commenting on the fallen star, or maybe not even really a star. He was just like, once he was kind of prominent and kind of well known, and now he's doing bit roles on TV shows.
Yeah,
You know what I
he's,
mean?
he encapsulates the Tarantino wants you to see more. He wants to pull back the curtain and show you more of the people that are not just the people on screen, but the behind the scenes of that. That the actors can be insecure and
Very
how
insecure.
they constantly are always fighting themselves to be better. Because the DiCaprio character in this film is a good actor, but he holds himself back because he's so insecure.
Yeah, and he's of course like in typical self-hating artist mode. He has an alcohol problem, and he irresponsible with certain things, but when he's on as an actor, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it really goes to show, like, it's not the talent, it's almost like the industry in and of itself kind of just like, once it passes you by, you're done. Like, it's gone.
Yeah, there's always a new shiny toy that's around the corner, and
there really is.
And that's kind of what the Sharon Tate character encapsulates in the movie.
In a way, but her star's rising.
Oh yeah.
Her star is
she's
very
the new.
much
No, that's
rising.
what I'm saying. She's the new shiny toy. Yeah.
Well, to a certain extent, I think there's definitely a contrast of what the Leo DiCaprio character is going to, and what the Sharon and what Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate character is going through when it comes to just one star's rising, one star's dipping.
Well, she's also married to Roman Polanski.
Very much so, and I see a lot of people are very upset about having him in the movie. They're also very upset about the movie not directly condemning him in any way, and it's tough without saying anything because it's such a minimalistic movie that it's not really bombastic
It's not what the movie's about.
It's not what the movie's about, and it would almost take away from what the movie's at least attempting to be, to do something like that. And also, he has such a minimalistic role in the movie.
He's literally, he barely,
I don't want to say
he might have
he's
said
just
a couple
there.
lines of dialogue, and that's it.
He like so many parts of this movie, he's just there in the background, because what Tarantino is really doing is trying to really immerse you into that, or at least his version or fantasy version of that late 1960s Hollywood world. You see, there's one sequence, there's just a flash of different neon signs of different, well-known places, like the Cinerama Dome lights up, or something like that, where you just see all of these things, because he wants to immerse you into that fantasy era, into an era I think he wishes he could go back to.
Yeah.
I mean,
he wishes it was still like that now.
He wishes there was, I guess, I mean, there's so much to talk about when it comes to cinema history at that time, but I guess he really wants that era to exist again, or go back to it. But of course, Hollywood is way different now. Things are way different now. What is very interesting is that the way in which this movie comments on stars and, like we said, star power, but Brad Pitt in the movie is not even like an actor or anything. He's a stuntman, which is something that still barely gets recognized today. This movie's like, this is what, 50 years later? People still barely recognizing stunt work and stunt people and their importance to the movie and things like that. I mean, and there are so many inside references to that time period and to that era that you kind of need to know, I think, something about that era to be interested in it, because like I said, there's not a lot of plot in order for you to grasp onto to really for this movie to carry you. You really have to
you're really gonna have to invest yourself in the characters.
But you gotta really care about that time period, about what Tarantino is trying to say about that time period, what the fantasy of that time period is, and all of those things, because there's no real plot for you to grasp onto and lead you along. Yet again, it's going back to what we've talked about several times. This movie's not really plot driven, it's dialogue driven, it's situational driven, and even then that's minimalistic in terms of driving the film along. I really like the film a lot. From a technical aspect, it's amazing. Like the cinematography,
it's a very
the
beautiful
editing,
film,
the screenplay is fantastic. I mean, it's a really it's one of the best, most well-made films you'll see in theaters this year.
The thing is, we can't get, if we're not going to do spoilers, we can't really get deep into it and give you some of our thoughts on maybe some of the issues or maybe some of the issues that other people have had.
Yeah, with the film. It is a long movie. It's a long one.
It's got 2 hours and 20. The middle is a little bit, fatty.
Some sequences drag on a little too long than others. I mean, especially when it's a movie, like I said, that the plot's not really carrying it. So you're like, are we going to move to the next thing? What's going on here?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for something to happen. Something's not really happening. There's all of those things that are kind of factoring into you negatively. And a lot of people just don't like to sit in the movies for like 2.5 hours.
Yes.
There's also that too.
Yeah.
But
seeing the movie a couple more times, it could change my perspective or whatever. And I've listened to some other opinions and that can factor into. But maybe we'll down the road do a spotlight on this and be able to get deeper into the movie and give more of our thoughts on it. But I think for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I like that the movie was more thematically driven than some of his other movies because a lot of times I think his thoughts get lost behind all the violence and
the dialogue,
and the dialogue, and so I really enjoyed this different change of pace for his movie.
I'll say this: it wasn't quite the movie I was expecting when it came to the trailers and just overall anticipation going into it. But I found myself really liking it a lot, and even liking it even more the more I think about it, and wanting to see it again. Yeah,
I might try to go see it again maybe here soon. But it should be in theaters for a little bit. So,
I think it will be.
But I think that this is a good stopping point. We'd love to know what you guys think of course, Tarantino's career. A lot of fans out there. If you don't like him, let us know. We want to hear about it. Let us know what you think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But that's going to end us on this episode of the Cinema Discovery Project. Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can find the audio for this podcast on Podbean or Apple Podcasts. And that will be it for this episode. Thank you for listening. And hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.